uh, household hazardous waste and very small quantity generator transportation training. I believe it's for most of you. I recognize that not all of you are new to hazmat. Some might have a lot of experience, but this is the initial training that needs, and I believe it has to be done every 3 years too. I'm not sure. But this is a little bit longer format today. It can be up to 4 hours. And as mentioned, when I kind of reach out to you folks to see if you're kind of following along with me, if you can give me some thumbs up, thumbs down, or whatever, that'll help this to go a little bit faster. I really believe that this should be face-to-face where we all get together in the various districts and I come to your area and teach. But that's not how we're doing it right now. I think COVID changed a lot of those things. I'm going to try very hard not to bore you with this PowerPoint. In fact, I believe PowerPoints really should be more focused around slides that and pictures that supplement the topic that you're talking about. And especially since you might be receiving hazardous materials and not in its proper container, I think that's even more important. So I'm going to try not to have lengthy slides that you need to read, more just pictures to help supplement with what we're talking about. I also try to do breaks on time. I would like to maybe, Michelle, if I'd like to at around 10 minutes to the hour approximately take a break. You could maybe send me a little something in the chat and see based on where I'm at in the, I might go just a few minutes longer, but I would like to do approximately 10-minute breaks at the top of the hour. And folks, if we can keep it to a sharp 10 minutes, that will also help me to get this done on time or just a little bit early and leave time for more lengthy questions at the end. You'll see on the page here, yes, my name is Steve Krieger. I started out with the State Patrol Capitol Security Officer at 45 years old. That was kind of my introduction to state government. I'm 167 years old now. No, I'm just kidding. I am getting a little bit closer to retirement. There used to be 4 MnDOT hazmat specialists, and now we're down to 1. You see that name below me, Dan Hosley. I believe he's joining in with us today. He's going to be taking my position and will probably be doing all the future training. Dan is both of us worked at the State Patrol with the commercial motor vehicle for a number of years. I focused a little bit more on the hazmat. Dan focused a little bit more on school bus and the busing programs out there. Then we both ended up on the MnDOT side, and we worked together doing safety audits for DOT companies. Any new US DOT number has to have when they are traveling interstate, which means they're crossing state lines, they have to have a safety audit within 1 year. I believe that's a good thing. No tickets or fines, they just got to pass. And that's another part of what Dan and I do. So feel free to reach out to Dan if needed.
Dan is here. He said he would
Awesome.
answer questions in the chat if they came up.
Thank you. And I might reach out to him potentially too to just see if he wants to comment or if we get stuck on something. But again, if we get a tough question, we might just take a note of it and try at the end to answer it or do that by email at a later date. You know, MnDOT is a very big organization, about 5,000 people in MnDOT. But there is a group of about 100 people that work with something called the Office of Freight and Commercial Vehicle Operations. That could be anywhere from permits to registration. And then there's an even smaller group of only about 10 of us that still do roadside inspections and work with the full compliance of the regs. That would be the people that do these safety audits, the people that do compliance reviews when a company is in a lot of trouble from roadside inspections. Similarly, the State Patrol has about 600 people, but in our state, we have about 100 people, about 50 civilians and about 50 troopers that are also specialists in hazardous materials. So that kind of sets up, you know, the agency that we're working with today. We just work in cooperation with the Minnesota Pollution Control as far as offering, the training as part of today. My specific job right now is less as a hazardous materials instructor for roadside inspections. Now I'm more, and Dan and I are hazardous materials response people. So when people reach out with questions or problems, which could even be the people in this audience, Dan and I answer the phone to help mitigate or answer some tougher questions about the hazardous materials. And where do we get, our information from? Well, we get it from the Code of Federal Regulations for Title 49, which is where all the transportation regs are found for the U.S. Department of Transportation. Again, today's just a resource. We're not going to do all of it, but that's where the regulations come from, and we're going to focus on a big part of that today. So the U.S. Department of Transportation really covers a lot of different agencies. This is an example of a slide. I really don't want you to write things down and necessarily take notes. But if you can see, Federal Aviation Administration, because for hazardous materials response or an incident, what Dan and I do is we also can reach out to other agencies for information or to assist on bad accidents roadside, for example. So who writes the rules for the trucks anyway? Well, that's the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, and they do write a few of the hazmat regs. But PHMSA, Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, on the bottom there, when they evolved more in like the 80s, 70s, and 80s, they took over the majority of the regulations for hazmat. So we get them from both, but primarily PHMSA writes the majority of the hazardous materials regulations. So again, U.S. Department of Transportation, you have a lot of different agencies. FMCSA and PHMSA take over the majority of it for the hazmat. And so what would be our goals and objectives today? Well, we also have another little bit of an overlap in that the U.S. Department of Transportation and the U.S. EPA, there's a little bit of overlap there and redundancy. And sometimes it's to make sure that even something that, for example, that might not be regulated by the U.S. Department of Transportation, that doesn't mean we want it dumped in a lake or a river. We're the land of 10,000 lakes. And the Minnesota PCA, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, is a very large agency because of that. And so they kind of took the lead for the household waste regulations. And that's kind of how that fell under that agency rather than us. But again, today we're going to assist with the training. And I can't, of course, we can't hit all the regs. But what I want to do today is just helping you with the identification of the hazmat. So there are 9 different classes of hazmat. Test question, how many different classes of hazmat are there? 9. That is something that you could write down, okay? You're going to be receiving these packages, and the packages might be in good shape. They might be in bad shape. The packages might be in good shape, but they're missing some of the communications. Looking at that third line, we're not talking about how you talk and communicate to each other. The term hazardous communications means shipping papers or emergency response information, placards, labels, and markings, or an EPA label that's on there, a hazardous waste label that's on there, which comes more, again, from some of the other regulations. But that's what we're talking about when we mention the word hazard communications, because that's going to be the massive part of your job is, hey, what is this product that came in? First of all, is it safe for me to even be approaching it? Or do we have a problem where we got to back off from this and my coworkers? Or can we approach it? Is it safe enough for us to handle? And then if it is, moving down to, well, where should we put this? How should we separate it? Where's the proper place for this to go? Because ultimately it's going to leave your facility and go somewhere else. And the bottom one, lumping that all together, security training and incident reporting, I know that can go in a lot of different directions. But again, with you as a handler and what your jobs are doing, basic security in that we just don't necessarily want the public to have access to this. And to do that, you're going to have some basic training. Even if you play a very small part of it, you're still part of handling the hazmat, and that's why you have to have the training. And then if there was a problem with it, who can you notify? 911, state duty officer who gets a hold of myself and Dan when it's more urgent, or just how do we report this as this, if we do have maybe a spill on site, basic reporting requirements. So those bottom, that last one, security training, incident reporting, I am just going to touch on that a little bit at the end today. But that's mostly what we're going to be talking about today, with a heavy emphasis on the top three: the 9 different classes of hazmat, the different packages that it can be in, and the hazard communications, primarily placards, markings, and labels. Placards are big, labels are small. They all have a number on the bottom of them, and that number is going to be the hazard class 1 through 9. Markings are things like numbers and names. Gasoline, 1203. Propane, 1075. So markings are things like numbers and names and orientation arrows and poison and inhalation hazard, different descriptors that help you understand the more specific hazmat that it is, because that can help you with where should this be stored and the segregation. And if you have a problem, if we have a nasty hazmat, that's a bigger problem. What pulls into the regs anyway? The movement of household waste, not in commerce. In other words, a person is bringing an old propane tank for their barbecue grill to a collection site. They're not really in commerce. They're not selling it. They could be in a commercial motor vehicle, and we'll talk about that next, or down the road. But the final intention is they're not in commerce. So they're not regulated to bring this hazmat in. But your collection site may only allow certain hazmats. It's my understanding there's like 62 counties. I don't know if all 62 counties even offer a household waste facility. Maybe they don't. Maybe some of the larger ones in the cities or around major hubs like, let's say, Mankato or Rochester might allow a lot of different kinds of household waste to come in. But regardless, once it's coming into, let's use that word VSQG, very small quantity generator, where you're not only collecting it, but you're helping to pre-package it and doing pre-transportation functions. That's kind of what pulls us into the regs, is that by the fact that you're handling it at that point. And certainly the bottom one is once this starts to go out by a commercial transporter to go to its final destination, it's absolutely involved in commerce at that point, whether people are making money or not. And so then the regs come into play. Just an example of a shipping paper. Again, I don't really want you to study this or anything. If you kind of look relatively close to the bottom on the left-hand side, you would see acetone. Okay. So in the book, the hazardous materials book found with PHMSA, Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, they list all the hazmats. Okay. They do them in alphabetical order. They also do them in numerical order. Dan and I have access to those books all the time. And because we're also, have to be able to help out during, odd hours. So, but that's how we get our information. All the information on the right gets involved with the packaging and what sort of package it should be in. And I recognize that a lot of people in this audience won't necessarily have anything to do with that. But at a larger site, you could be, okay? And you could be involved with the segregation. But in any hazmat book, again, looking at it with what is that proper shipping name? Acetone, or look below that, acetone, cyanohydrin stabilized, acetone oils. When that truck is going down the road actually shipping this, they need to have that proper shipping name because that makes a world of difference. Cheapest ticket for a roadside inspection for a hazmat is $385. It's nasty. By the time you get into placarding, it's like $785. So the regs can be very, very serious. But for what you're working with, I don't know if you even have a hazmat book in your shop. Maybe it's needed, maybe it's not. But that's what we use to really pinpoint, are we, dealing with a hazmat that is safer to handle, or if the package is bad, maybe you shouldn't be touching it at all. Which brings us to the emergency response guidebook. Could anybody give me a thumbs up if you have at least access to this at your household waste facility, or how about you know what it is? Okay, good. And I'm not going to do a lot of teaching on that, okay? But on a shipping paper, they used to be able to list the hazmat in various ways. They no longer can do that. That went away about 7 years ago. So now I like to just say number, name, hazard class, packing group. ID number, name, hazard class, packing group. Now, ID number, look at the book, that's in the third column, okay? But on a shipping paper, the ID number comes first, which is normally a UN, but it could be an NA. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can see my pointer mouse scrolling on your screen? Okay, excellent. So it could be NA, okay? So the proper name is not the UN number. The proper name is the ID number, okay? And on a shipping paper, it's the ID number. So UN 1090 for acetone, comma, then the proper shipping name, acetone. The hazard class, hazard class 3, there's 9 different classes of hazmats, and some have subdivisions. Okay, so we're looking for 1 through 9, but some have subdivisions. And then the packing group, if there is one. Packing group 2 in this case. Packing group 1 is, in other words, this is a really kind of a nastier hazmat, and we want this in a really good package. Packing group 2, kind of medium. Packing group 3, less dangerous, more of a minor hazard. And that can come into play with some of our discussion going down the road. And all this, like these special provisions and stuff, is going to be more for the different handlers. But coming back to the book, okay, when you open up the book, the first section is the ID number. You can look it up by the number. I believe that's yellow. Then you go to the next section, which is blue, and you can look it up by name. Okay, so you can look it up either way if you had a damaged package. And then it'll tell you, go to page 125, which is an orange section. And page 125 says, hey, this is okay. You can handle it. Why don't you stay 5 feet away? Actually, why don't you stay 50 feet away? Why don't you stay like 500 feet away? And this is bad if this is spilled. And why don't you back up 5,000 feet and start calling for help and shut down the town? That's what the orange section does. And the orange section, by the time it's really nasty, will also send you to the green section. Think of green and being really sick. That's how I remember it. Because you got to have like an inhalation hazard going on, like anhydrous ammonia, which we have a plethora of in the land of 10,000 lakes with all of our farming. A lot of anhydrous ammonia, which is an inhalation hazard. Chlorine gas. Do we have a couple of water towers in Minnesota? Yeah. And pretty much every one uses chlorine gas and oxidizers and corrosive at that water treatment tower or facility. But it could be an old-fashioned water tower. And they use chlorine gas there. That's the one with the black skull. That's a white skull there. Black skull is bad, okay? And by the time you get to those things having a leaking or problem, The yellow would be the ID number, anhydrous ammonia 1004. Okay. The name, anhydrous ammonia, is found in the blue section. They send you to the orange section, and the green section is stuff that can be very nasty for the public and or water. Okay. So that's kind of the layout for the ERG. That's my slam bang on that one. And one final thing that I think could help you out a lot is the SDS or the MSDS. Now, the reason I say MSDS is that was used forever. Material Safety Data Sheet. About, I don't know, 8 years ago, OSHA started mandating that, okay, we just want SDS sheets now. And they changed the format a little bit, and we had a little bit of chaos for about 1 or 2 years, just because the whole world was not on the same page. By the way, the United Nations helps to put out that book, and it only comes out every 4 years. It takes a long time to get a hazmat in the book, and for roadside, we can get updated on how to handle it, but there's a lot of jumps and hoops that you have to go through even to get in that book so that the average person knows, how to handle it. The SDS sheets are primarily for OSHA, but you can still see MSDS sheets. And now they are all in sync in that, generally speaking, I can't guarantee it, but line 14, section 14, whatever you want to call it, is going to have the transportation information on it. Is this regulated for the US DOT? We're not talking about for the fire. We're not talking about the health hazard. We're not talking about anything else. Line 1 is pretty much the name of the product, acetone versus acetone oils. Okay? Acetone. Then you go to line 14. This is a test question. I want you to remember this one now. And that will tell you if it's regulated for transportation going down the road. Maybe it is not for us, but it is for Canada. Maybe it's neither, but it is regulated when it's transported by air or by water. I'll show you a slide on that later on. But I just want you to kind of remember on an SDS sheet, line 14 is very helpful. Okay. So let's say something came in to your facility. I just want you to look at the name on the package. If you think that you can handle it and it's safe, and the name on the package is ethyl methyl Gertrude, you could literally type in ethyl methyl. Now, what was it, Gerhard? Or was it Gumby? You got to get the name exactly. In this case, you're looking at the package, you put in ethyl methyl Gertrude, and you search it by the name. And I normally put in a space, and then I put SDS. And I love to get them in a PDF format. That works really good for me. So I put in a space, and I even put PDF in there. And that will, generally speaking, will just bring up the package for me. Okay. Now, I know that this is probably very small on your screen, but if you can see this top line right there, can you see that that says acetone and section 1 or line 1? Now, here's where we got to see if I can get really lucky. I'm going to escape, double click. Yay! Give me a hand clap if you can see that a little bit better. All right. So, line 1, okay? For today, I don't care about all this other stuff. I just don't. Oh, by the way, there's the pictograms, which is not US DOT. That's a pictogram, which is for our, think of more like the SDS sheets or the emergency response guidebook that you were looking at. Okay. We're going to skip the fire, accidental handling and storage. We're going to get by all of that and scroll down to what line? Everybody screaming out loud, line 14. Okay. And it might be hard to find. Okay. This one really goes overboard. I mean, they really break it out, and they tell you flat out that for you know, again, international or whatever, that, you know, that's what it's going to be. But they say right there, I hope it lets me highlight it. Yes, it does. DOT. See that right there? That's for U.S. Department of Transportation, and we're going to call it acetone. So you would be looking for ethyl methyl Gertrude. You want to find the exact SDS or MSDS sheet, and it's telling you flat out that's hazard class 3. This one is kind of cool because they even show you a picture of what the label or placard would look like. Okay, so I know I kind of hit that one kind of hard. Give me a hand clap if you kind of learned something there. Okay, because even with like new roadside troop, oh my gosh, I did something right, Michelle. Because even for like roadside troopers, or even for, I'm just going to say a lot of people so I don't get fired today. Okay, it's just a lot of people that forget this, right, Dan Hosley? And we're I'm reaching out my coworker here. It's so simple. You look at the package, you type it in at a search exactly the way you see it. Granted, you might have a damaged package, but can you see now how going back to hold on, I'm getting ahead of myself here. So let me see if I can close that window. Oh, thanks a lot. Okay, I guess we're still okay. Going back, can you see how that can be extremely helpful? More than that. I mean, I go to there, okay, because I'm a little quicker at it because I'll look it up by the number or the name. If I can't see the whole name, but I could see the number, or vice versa, that book matches how a shipping paper should be. I think it's yellow. That's the ID number, and then the blue is the name. And so you can use that to figure out what product you're exactly looking at. Then you go look it up online, you go to line 14, and then that's going to tell you if that's regulated for the U.S. Department of Transportation or not. So for the entire world, line 14 is reserved for the U.S. Department of Transportation. And now, I am sorry, but you're going to be looking at this slide for a while. But then later on, I promise to go to all the pretty pictures. Okay. On these 9 different classes of hazmat, I believe in my crazy world that they were kind of designed for hazard class 1 and its ability to hurt you if something went wrong with the package. That's really big. It's not just the hazmat, but it's the package that they put it in. That's why the book is like an inch and a half thick, because we're just going to focus like on the 9 different classes of hazmat today and the different communications that go with it, like labels and placards and labels. They always have the number at the bottom. Pretend you're colorblind. A placard and label, if you can see it, will always have the number at the bottom and tell you what hazard class it is. So snappy snap, you guys are just all became colorblind. You still should be able to tell me what hazard class it's in if I showed this to you. Okay. So going back to hazard class 1 with explosives, it's really bad. It's really bad. We're going to put it in a cardboard box. Doesn't make much sense, does it? But I'm telling you that dynamite, okay, is going to be in a cardboard box separated by the dynamite 1.1, is going to be separated from the detonators 1.2. And depending upon the distance, the dynamite is going to be in a really thick cardboard box in a steel container. Kind of like a package in a package. But when you get down to like 1.4 or 1.5, like 1.4 might be a consumer grade fireworks. Okay. And it might be in something a little bit more, something thicker than a cereal box, if you bought a whole box of them. Or maybe they're wrapped in wax paper in a box. I'm just simply saying that and trying to give you another example of thinking that it's just not the hazmat, it's the package that it's in, because that's your entire life. That's what makes you the superstars, is you have to be able to just look at something, and as you approach it, before you might not even see a label. Maybe the label's off. Maybe the label or placard, you're going to be seeing labels more, not placards. Placards are more for really big packages, bulk packages, or they're going to go on the vehicle. Okay. But when you look at that label, the label could be damaged, or the label could be missing, or it could be in a completely wrong package, maybe even a wrong hazmat package. You still have to be able to quickly figure out, do I even want to keep approaching that? It's a box. It's a hissing box. A hissing box. You probably have hazard class 2, a cylinder inside the box that the people shoved into it before they gave it to you. Okay. And that's a lot more dangerous. So let's go back to hazard class 1. And if you wanted to start to get better at this on your own, I would memorize the 9 different classes. And I'm going to try to lay it out in something that kind of sort of makes sense when you think about it with the package that it's in. Okay. So hazard class 1, explosives. Think of like a dynamite going off. Even on nuclear explosions, they measure that like like the TNT explosive limit, and stuff like that. Okay. But I do want to also suggest to you that there are different subdivisions with explosives. Now, a firecracker, that's just a little bit smaller boom, right? A rocket ship is pretty much a contained explosion, and you put people on top of it and send them up into the air. Actually, that might more be like a fuel, but that's the point I'm trying to get at, is it's a controlled package. But wouldn't it be fair to say that even the firecracker is like a mini grenade, and its ability to come out and touch you if something goes wrong with that package? So now let's go to hazard class 2. Okay. When it says gases, we say gasoline or we say gas for like our entire life. And I think our brains sometimes automatically don't go to the right area for this. Gases and gasoline is hazard class 3, flammable liquids. What they're talking about here with gases, and you might want to make a note on this, not for a test, I'm just saying it might help your brain to grasp that we're talking about compressed gas in cylinders. Compressed gas in cylinders. And those are not cardboard boxes. Those are really, really good containers. Why? Because they can go boom if something goes wrong with that container. So, well, I'm not going to pick up a grenade or, again, dynamite on a rollover car accident. Okay, if the packages are in good shape, why would the fire department put water on it? Why would you put water on it? You're just damaging the package. Okay, hazard class 2, these are really good packages. If they're hissing, or you see a crack, which does not happen that often, in the middle of a cylinder, that's a grenade that's ready to go off. I wouldn't even touch that. I'd probably walk out of the entire building or just go somewhere else and just report what's going on. I wouldn't get anywhere near a crack. It rarely, rarely, rarely happens. Okay. But you get a crack in a weld on a cylinder, you don't want to be anywhere near that, which is slightly different than if it's hissing, because it could be just a loose valve. Oh, and it's just oxygen here. I'll close that valve. Oh, it's a non-flammable gas, which is similar to an oxygen. I'll just close the valve. Oh, it's propane and I'll just close the valve, but maybe I shouldn't do this during my smoke break. Black skull, get out of the room, scream, bloody murder, and just, yeah, get out, get out. You don't want a whiff of that. For the purposes of my teaching, you're dead. You might live, might have to go to a hyperbaric chamber. I don't think they're going to get it all out of your lungs. You're going to asphyxiate or your lungs are gone. So for today's purposes, black is bad. Black is really, really bad. And you're going to see it down here on hazard class 6. But this is like chlorine gas, as an example. This is, you're already in a cylinder, okay? And you got a hissing black skull. You don't want to be anywhere in that building. You want everybody out. Where you got to follow your own protocol on what you would do. You're the experts. You're handling this all day. You're handling it more than I'm handling it. Well, I'm doing the inspection, but I don't know. I think on a given year of Dan and I were busy, we probably did 1,000 roadside inspections on a given year when we were busy. Dan might have done even more when you start talking about school buses. There's 20,000 school buses in the state of Minnesota, and 13 guys check all 20,000 of those every year. Okay. So, you know, we're used to doing the roadside inspections, but you're the experts on handling this stuff. And part of this training today is I want you to get so good at the 9 classes that you just get a little bit better understanding of whether you should even be approaching something. And maybe you spend your whole life approaching it and it's no big deal. Okay. But it could be. And so that's kind of hazard class 2 there. We've only done 2 of them so far. And Michelle, I have about 11:45. Is that about what you, at 12:45? Is that about what you have?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to watch my clock here, but it's kind of little on my screen. So I'm just going to go, for a little bit longer, and then we'll just see if we can take a break. And you folks are doing fantastic. Okay. So explosives, hazard class 1, compressed gases in cylinders. Make your brain think about that. They're all, you're handling a grenade. You just haven't pulled the pin. That's all. Okay. Hazard class 3 is flammable liquids, and yes, combustible liquids, but your flammable liquid versus 4, where it's more like a flammable solid, kind of, sort of. Okay. Spontaneous combustible. Think of like grass getting really hot, in a bag during this hot summer, and it just goes on fire. It's still kind of a solid. So flammable liquids versus flammable solids. Okay. And this dangerous one, what? This pretty blue one, that's metals, but it's still a solid. It's generally speaking, it's metals, and you put water on them and things get worse. Okay. So coming back to here on the flammable liquids, a lot of it has something to do with the flash point. Okay. When you're doing flammable liquids, you got to think about the flash point. Now, could be getting in the weeds a little bit too much, but again, I want to take each area and talk about it just a little bit more. Is it fair to say that gasoline is going to go boom a little bit more than diesel? Okay. Maybe someone give me a thumbs up so I know you're still awake. Okay. So, and a lot of times it's the vapors that are coming off from this. So you might not get a hissing like you would over here. Okay. So that's why, okay, boom, really bad boom. Okay. Okay. Maybe a little less of a boom, and it could be a boom with a fire, or it could boom with not. Okay. But this one, you got flammable liquids that can ignite, or the vapors can ignite, but they're going to do that on gasoline more than diesel. So how in the heck do you know when they bring in a package? I mean, in a truck on a roadside inspection, we get yellow stuff in a glass bottle. Use your imagination. Okay. It could be anything, right? But could it be gasoline? For you people, you could probably get some leftover. It's a little leftover gasoline, kerosene, diesel. You don't even know what it is. But if it has a gasoline component in it, probably not a good time to be having a smoke break with that. Okay. Or I'm being silly, but I'm trying to be serious in that if you had an incident, you want to know in your facility where your different hazard classes are. You want to be able to go boom. Yeah, so you might not even touch the explosives. I don't think most household waste facilities would even receive it. But you could get it. Someone's going to drive up in a truck. Okay, so clap if someone has ever driven up to your truck or car and inquired about if they can drop off their fireworks. Nobody? I'm okay. All right. So you want to be that educator at that point. Okay. I mean, we're also in this business. We just don't want it to end up in a swamp, or something like that, or just thrown on the road because people get frustrated because the government agency wouldn't even accept the product. Okay. So we want to be able to talk with the people. I'm sorry, we don't handle hazard class 1 here. Well, it's not dynamite. I know, but we don't do any sort of hazard class 1 here. Okay. But here, hazard class 3, my goodness, you could get so many different things on that, and they could dump it all in the same bin. So it would behoove you to just do maybe a little gentle, questioning and be welcoming to the people because we want to receive it. We just don't want it dumped. But we also, for our own safety, need to know a little bit of what's going on. Okay? So gasoline versus kerosene versus diesel versus acetone, and nobody even knows what's mixed in this thing. Maybe you have a particular salvage drum that is designed for that, and it's going to get the flammable 3 label and or placard when that thing goes out of your facility, because that one's going to pose the higher danger. Okay, now I'm going to quickly jump back to this hazard class 4, and then we'll take our break. So if that's flammable liquids and this is flammable solids, what I like to think of on this one, see with the lines going up and down, my brain goes matchstick. It helps me to remember it. A matchstick, a fire stick, a fusee. Railroads use these larger fusees to actually fuse the rail tracks together, or like when they have to weld and do a repair. But it could be something really small, like a match. Okay, spontaneous combustible. Use your imagination. A lot of different products. They have a component to them where they pose the flammable hazard. So again, are you looking for the 4 on the bottom? And then now look at the top, flammable. Look at the top on hazard class 3, flammable. Okay, the topic for 3 and 4 is flammable, liquids, and then solids. Okay, so then on this one, the fire department pulls up and they got a little shed fire, and the neighbors are kind of curious, and they kind of put the shed fire out, and then it kind of reignites and keeps burning some more. So they bring in a tanker truck, and then they kind of put it out, but then it restarts. And then I called for another back. Someone else called for a tanker. We could not put out this little shed fire. We must have had the whole neighborhood standing around. Everybody's laughing. We're all out of water. Finally, the chief says, "Krieger, come here." We went with a long pike pole, reached into this little shed and dragged out a snowmobile that had a lot of metals on that engine compartment at that time period. Yeah. So we're dumping water on it, and we just made everything worse. Okay. Dangerous when wet. Pretty little blue one. Okay. But that's a nasty little booger. Okay. And it's just something to pay attention, because let's say they were stored in your facility and the sprinkler system went off. Okay. Now you got a bigger problem. Hey, why are those large storage bins over there burning and on fire? Because they're dangerous when they're wet. Can you read the pretty blue sign? Dangerous when wet. Needs to be dry. Even on roadside and stuff, stopped a truck. It's all wet in the trailer, a huge semi-trailer. Okay. All with bins and huge bins of slag, metal. I go, why is your floor wet? Well, I don't know. We had a bad storm last night. Well, what do you do with the semi-trailer? Well, we back it up to the loading dock. What'd you do? Leave the doors open during the storm? And now you have all this water in the bottom of a semi-trailer, and the entire semi-trailer is full with 42,000 pounds of metals. What are you guys doing? So when you think of it from your perspective, you could get all sorts of things like that brought in. And you don't want to just throw it in a bin and I don't know what it is. It's just something to consider. I am going to take a break at this point. Okay, I want some sort of signal as to whether of how much you're enjoying this hazmat class instruction today. Are you really, really enjoying? Okay. And please, oh my goodness, I'm getting some great responses. Please do not indicate if your feet are up on the desk or not. We don't want to be getting anybody in trouble. In fact, but I got to tell you, taking away the stress on difficult subjects like hazmat, I think helps. Okay. So I want you to be relaxed. And I want you to just, I know we're doing a lot of talking in this beginning part, but I do think that if you get a little bit better understanding of the background of the different hazmats, and yes, I mean, I'm also terribly redundant. It helps to lock it in your brain a little bit so that you can remember it. We're now at about 102, so I'm going to restart. And yes, I'm going to try to give you another, just see if you can hang in there approximately 50 minutes. So now, Hazard Class 1 explosive. It's in kind of a, you'd think it'd be in a stronger package, and it's not. But in its package, it's relatively safe. If you have a problem, that's a really, really big boom, which is probably why it's Class 1. When you take an oxygen tank, not even flammable, not even a black skull, we're all going to die. Okay. If that thing goes off, that's still, it's almost somewhere between a grenade going off, depends on what size the container is, and a tank round going off, or artillery. It depends. At a facility, it could level all the homes. At a facility where they have the really large ones that they use to fill up the trucks and the trailers for on the road. When one of those goes, it is almost like dynamite. It'll just blow down. The concussion will blow down the homes surrounding it. Okay. By the time it gets to that point, who cares if it's flammable or not? You're already going to be blown to bits. But that's probably why it's in Hazard Class 2. Depending on the package, it could be as bad as like a dynamite. Okay. But now I want to come back to this one and expand a little bit because it'll help us when we work down the next couple three. Okay. So you have this hazardous materials cargo tank going down the road. Again, it's a really good package. Okay. Really good package. For Dan and I, we've had anhydrous ammonia roll over. But if the package is in really good shape, well, you don't understand, the driver's dead. Yeah, but is the tractor is almost destroyed. Is the package, because it's just not about the hazmat, it's about the package that it's in. Is that package in good shape, sir? And with volunteer fire departments or a full-time fire department, we're not going to tell them what to do. That incident commander, he's in control of that scene. Even if he's a brand new volunteer firefighter, they run that scene and they have to evaluate weather, the conditions, manpower, everything else. But I have not told them that they can't upright an anhydrous ammonia tank on its side if the package is good. The valves aren't leaking. There's nothing wrong with the package. It'd probably be safer to upright it and then try to unload it than do it when it's on its side. They have small, non-bulk anhydrous ammonia tanks. They're out there. I don't know if you would see them at your facility, but we've had them dropped off at multiple MnDOTs. And the supervisors have called me. We got like 18 of them. And I go, what? So it says anhydrous ammonia right on. Really? These bottles are like really old. Okay, they're not hissing, are they? Well, no. I go, well, you want to pick them up? Not really. Good. That's why I'm calling you. It's like, I wouldn't pick them up either. I'd get a state contractor on there and have him pick these up, have them get them out of here. You have no idea where they came from. And they're like, it was like 18 old anhydrous ammonia cylinders that look about the size of grandma's or grandpa's oxygen bottle. That's about what they look like. So again, you got to get you're going to be the masters at this. You want to be able to recognize things even though you still haven't had a chance to pick up on all the communications. Your brain should be going, it's a cylinder. That's hazard class 2. It's that easy. It's a cylinder, hazard class 2. So if a great big cargo tank of, say, just oxygen was going down the road, is that a hazmat? Say yes. Okay. What happens if it's a smaller cargo tank on a straight truck? We call that a hazmat bobtail. And they do more like the farms and things like that. It could be, okay. Is that a hazmat? Say yes. Okay. Is grandpa and grandma's oxygen bottle, is that a hazmat? Well, it's just non-flammable. Is it a hazmat? Is it compressed gas in a cylinder? Yes, it's a hazmat. Okay. Now, how much hair do I have on my head? Okay. And I grab a hairspray. What do you think? Is an aerosol can a hazmat? And I want your brain to go, it's compressed gas in a cylinder. The answer is yes. Even if it's a non-flammable gas. I think some of the hairsprays are more flammable gases. And again, you're not going to get the original box that it came in. You're just going to get an individual can. But you need to know, or you could, kind of goof around this summer and throw an aerosol can in a campfire and tell me what happens. Don't do that. Don't do that. Okay. Now you throw a paint one in there. Okay. Not, like a volunteer fire. Well, let's say I don't want to say what happened on that one either. Yeah. I'm giving live examples. Yep. Fire department. Yep. And they're burning down an old farm for a practice drill. And all of a sudden there was some old paint cans that were in there, like spray paint cans, boom, all over this guy's brand new bunker gear. Lucky he had his shield down, right? Okay. And big flame with it because it was a flammable gas. It's just a paint can. Okay. And you're experts. I know that you're handling this stuff all the time. It's the damage can that I want you to pay attention to. Okay. Because it's just not about the hazmat. Boy, am I redundant. It's about the package that it's in and the condition. Okay. So aerosols are hazard class 2, compressed gas cylinders. They're hazmats. Okay. 3 and 4, flammable liquids, flammable solids. Now we're going to come back to 5. And I'm going to remind you that I temporarily made you colorblind. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to inconvenience you. But if you were colorblind, look at oxidizer and look at oxygen. What is the difference? Well, the top looks the same. The middle, one says oxygen and one says oxidizer. Okay, I hope you're paying attention and you're just not going really fast and you kind of miss that. I hope you don't miss that. But most importantly, if you're colorblind, you got a 2 on the bottom, you got a 5.1 on the bottom. 2 is going to be in a compressed gas cylinder. 5.1 is going to be in a pail, probably a plastic pail. I wish it was a steel pail. Wait for the picture. Wait for the picture later on. Okay. But that 2 versus that 5.1 is the only thing that really separates them. Now, let's not be boring. I'm not going to take you into the regs. On the majority of these hazmats, not on a radioactive, not on some of the explosives, but on the majority of most of these placards or labels that you're looking at right now, the name is not required to be on there. So if you're colorblind and the word oxygen and the word oxidizer are not required to be on that placard or label, now what's the difference? It's just the number at the bottom. So I'm hoping that by the time we're done with these 9 classes of hazmat, you're a little bit better at recognizing what class it is and therefore recognizing a potential hazard with it. Okay. When you get into the organic peroxides, about 6, 7 years ago, on the one on the far right with the red on the top, they actually changed that and they added the red on top of it. And when you get into certain organic peroxides, okay, the really nasty ones, okay, they just have an even more additional fire component. Instead of talking about the difference between organic peroxides and organic, uh, the difference between oxidizers is it's oxygen on steroids, whereas the organic peroxides, it's like they'll eat anything. I'm not kidding you. They'll eat dirt. They'll even start to burn concrete if you get these things burning. Okay. So oxidizers is oxygen on steroids. So if you have a fire, it can become a really big deal. And organic peroxides like to use all sorts of fuel sources. They're going to eat your hand up. I hope you have gloves on because they're going to eat your hand, or they can. Okay. So, and then some of them too can have a flammable component. Now they're way down on the list on number 5 because when they're in their package, even though it might only be a plastic pail, okay, they're not going to go boom like, say, a hazard class 1 or 2. Okay. And if there is a problem, it's going to be more confined to that particular area. But again, the problem is when they fail, and a lot of these can't be even, sometimes they can be in the same truck together, but they have to be segregated, which means like in your facility, they would have to be segregated, and then it's okay. But when the package fails, they can have a problem when they start mixing with other things. So think of a campfire with hazard class 2 and oxygen. You're sitting by a little campfire and you already have the fire, you already have the logs, that's your fuel. If you flame it, or take a little cardboard and, or your hands or whatever, and add air to that, the fire gets more intense. Okay. With oxidizers, it's that just exponentially multiplied way over. You get a fire with an oxidizer, just run. Okay. It's because you're never going to put that out. It's going to be a runaway fire and you can't stop it. Think Tesla. Think lithium batteries all the way down at class 9. What were they thinking? I don't know what they're thinking. I think lithium batteries should be in their own hazard class. Okay. But lithium battery, Tesla, when they get on fire, you're not putting those out. You're just not. They're runaway fires. And oxidizers can be like that. So my biggest one that I want you to remember about all that blabbing on that is oxidizers is like oxygen on steroids, and organic peroxides like to eat anything for a fuel source, which could make a fire get much more out of control and much more difficult for someone to put out, okay, or much more dangerous for your hands. But if you're handling it the right way, it's fine. That's all the way. It's all the way down at hazard class 5. Well, then why do we put poisons all the way down at 6? Because now it's a package in a package. You're not going to get it that way, but it's going to, generally speaking, it's a package in a package with additional communications. Okay. Communications, to remind you, are things like placards, they're big, labels, they're small. They always have a number on the bottom. Markings are things like numbers and names and orientation arrows, additional descriptors on how on that specific hazmat. Okay. And you know what? This stuff is poison. So we're going to make you put poison communication on the package. So a package in a package. It might be a plastic bottle inside a box. Doesn't seem like much, but transportation down the road, that's how it has to be. Or oopsies, out of service. Now the truck is not going anywhere till they fix it. Meanwhile, all of my friends in this audience today, people come walking in, they might even have a poison and who knows what in a pop bottle. You have no idea, right? So you have to become the experts. In fact, even better at Dan and I on recognizing some of these strange things, because that's what your job is, doing it all day. I hope you live a long life. I hope you live 200 years. I hope it, well, maybe not 200. That'd be painful, but a big long life and you never have an incident. But on a lot of these incidents, just like anything else, it takes one. Takes one person to cross the highway and in an instant you're gone. Hopefully this stuff doesn't happen and hopefully you don't have problems. But can you pick up on the black skull on hazard class 6? Now, what's the difference between that and hazard class 2? Well, first of all, you're all going to die. Okay. Now, in hazard class 2, the compressed gas in a cylinder, the valve is open and it's hissing a little bit. Run for your life. You're not touching that thing. Okay. You're not going to hold your breath and close it. You're just going to get out of there. Okay. On hazard class 6, it's a solid or a liquid. But if you put your nose next to it and you get a whiff of it, it's also an inhalation hazard. Give me a clap if that made sense. Okay. So black skull is really, really, really bad. You probably shouldn't even be receiving it at your place, but you might. Or maybe you get it and you didn't know it, and now you're thinking, what is that horrible smell? Or horrible smell with gagging. Good luck. I'll start praying for you. Okay. So black skull is bad. Okay. Maybe you get empty containers on it. Oh, this compressed gas in a cylinder, and the guy tells you it's mostly empty. No. I'm sorry. When on a roadside inspection and they're telling me the flammable, little propane things, they're all empty and they just keep arguing it, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go over here and work on my report, and you take a little smoke break and crack one of them open and tell me what happens. Okay. If you get an empty black skull compressed gas in a cylinder and they want to drop it off and they're telling you it's empty and it's your policy not to take it, don't take it. Or, then they don't take it. I don't know. Go stick it over. Use your own common sense and try to figure out how to handle that. But on hazard class 6, it's going to be a poison or liquid that if you smelled it because the package was bad, it's also going to kill you. Package in a package with additional communications. That's why it's all the way down at number 6. Number 7, even with the fire department, okay, they say, go save the guy. Why? Because it's how close you get to it and how long you're exposed to it, right? Proximity and over time. Okay. So the radioactives are generally speaking in very, 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 very good packages. By the time you get to weapons grade, okay, we've never had a release of that. Well, we did in a movie. Yeah, that was in a movie. Okay. There's never been a release of a radioactive, that's we've even documented. Okay. And by the time you get down to the little medical ones for like a cancer treatment, okay, again, the package is so good, you can't even break it. And then in the medical world too, once that has been used for the patient, it's spent, it's all gone. It's completely emptied in the medical process. So they just have an empty bag, which I've gotten phone calls on because it somehow ended up in a dumpster and ended up blowing down on the road on Highway 35 close to the Capitol. Okay? So that's a different situation. Okay. But you might receive radioactive packages. I don't know. You don't want to, I don't like to say one particular name, but the fast delivery trucks, okay, they deliver radioactives. Okay. The driver's not sitting on it. They're in the back of the truck and they're secured and they're in really good packages. And if if it emits enough radioactivity that it needs to have the label and or the placard on the truck, it's just something that you need to be aware of. By the time you get down to hazard class 8, can you try not to walk through it? All of us with the Department of Transportation have either witnessed, done it ourselves, or saw somebody else. We're on an emergency scene. It's like, hey, my boots are melting. Hey, dude, there's a corrosive placard right there and you're standing in it. And I'm talking about like maybe a cargo tank or a bulk package that leaked. Okay. But again, for you folks, it really doesn't matter. Wear your protective stuff. I mean, they got a picture of a hand right on the placard and the label. Okay, protect yourself. And if you have a spill, maybe you can even do it with some floor dry. Follow your policy. You know what it is, but it's way down at number 8 because you pretty much got to be getting it on your skin before you're having a problem. I would like you to consider that there are many different types of corrosives. The heavy ones can eat right through a lot of stuff. Like think of like an organic peroxide. The nasty corrosives, okay, they can be nasty on to your person, okay? But there's lighter corrosives that are less, and you really won't know that. In the DOT world, it's regulated by the package that they're in. A thin package, a thick plastic pail, a really thick 55 barrel drum, and you can't open the head. It only has a screw off versus a steel 55-gallon barrel drum. So in our world, we look at the different packages and make sure it's in the right package going down the road because we're looking at shipping paper. Again, all of you superheroes out there, you're getting people walking in with stuff and you don't know what it is. So I'm just saying, use some common sense. Be polite. Ask some questions. You're not getting answers, maybe be a little bit more assertive. Hey, I don't want you to get hurt, and I also don't want me to get hurt unloading this stuff. I'll help you, but you know, what do you think it is? Just try to gather a little bit more information. In class 9, miscellaneous hazmat, which is where they put lithium batteries. Oh my goodness. I don't know what to say about that one. If you did have a lithium battery going off in the cargo department of an airplane, please pray that the pilot can land that plane in 15 minutes because it's going to be a runaway fire and you're all going to die. That's how it is. It doesn't happen that much. Wish I could show you a video of a Tesla shown in a swimming pool because that's where they pushed it into, and then it reignited a month later. You can't put these fires out. You just can't. They're called runaway fires. Oxidizers can be like that because with a flammable component, they can really make it out of control. But lithium batteries can do it all by themselves. They don't need anything else. And that's why you can't even put them out. Fire departments can use a blanket in like to help direct the smoke and some of the flames so that they could maybe extricate someone out of a car, okay, to buy a little extra time or depending on wind situations. But I just want to say that even though, you know, environmentally hazardous substance, you know, class 9, it's not always, if that package fails, the lithium battery, it can be really, really bad, like a dynamite. Okay. But they have it down in class 9 because they are really, really, really good packages. And a lot of money is going into making sure that that package doesn't fail. I'm just simply saying when they do fail, you got a problem. Let's go backwards. Class 8. Okay. Don't drink it. Okay. Don't rub it on your hands. Okay. It's way down there at number 8, but an exposure to it when the package is bad is it can be as dangerous as anything else. If you wanted to do some additional learning on your own, I would recommend DOT Chart 17. Mr. Steve, why is it called that? I don't know. They've had 17 different charts, and like an emergency response guidebook, they're only updated so often. And you'd have to have some significant changes before they're going to go through the effort to update it. But imagine like kind of like a book with like a front and back cover, and that's it. It ends up being 4 pages. But if you're lucky enough to get a hard copy of these, what's kind of cool about them is, you know, so the front is you're looking at the markings and examples. And then you open it up, and on the inside, you're looking at labels. And then on the other side, you're looking at placards, and you flip it over to the back side, and that's where you get a placarding table. So let me see if I can make this work again. That would be cool. brat. Worked before. One more time. So again, it's just 4 pages. And if you, to be an inspector for like the State Patrol, you would have to also pass a, hands-on inspection, okay? But for the written portion to become a hazmat instructor, if you read this over and over and over and just the first time just kind of browse through it and get used to the 9 different classes, by the time you're reading the fine print and you get really good at it, you could pass a class to be a hazmat inspector for a roadside inspection. That's how much I would like to recommend this book. Okay. It just, sorry. And I'm sorry, I can't show you, but again, it just goes through that. I'm going to have to talk about what's on the back page since it won't let me show you. Michelle, do you think that's just because we're sharing it? I don't know why it's doing that.
Not sure.
Because it did open before. I mean, I don't see how that could have anything to do with our audience size. Anyway, so I'll just have to explain this to you. When you go back to looking at the different hazard classes, okay? Hazard class 1, I told you, has dynamite and it has like firecrackers, right? 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3s, the nasty ones, those are called table 1 hazmats. Dynamite is a table 1. If you have 1 stick of dynamite, in fact, if you had 1 ounce of dynamite, you not only would have to put a label on the package, you got to put a placard on the truck. You got to put a placard 4 times on the truck. Those are called table 1 hazmats. All the other hazmats, you'd have to have either a bulk package of it, a really big package, or more than 1,000 pounds of the table 2 hazmats. Most of these are table 2 hazmats. Okay. And remember,
Steve, I was sorry to interrupt. I just put a link in the chat that I think is the full 4-page.
Oh, good. So then you folks on your own, if you could kind of navigate to that 4th page, and I'll just do it off the top of my head. Okay. So then let's just say that one more time. Any amount of a table 1 in a hazard class, if it's called a table 1, it's bad enough that if you have any amount of it, you got to put 4 placards on the truck. And just a side note, when placards are required, that's when you have to have the hazmat endorsement on your license. You got to have a CDL. Okay. That's how, that doesn't play into your world. It does play in the Department of Transportation worlds. The reason I'm bringing this up to you is because I want you to also not only be able to recognize the 9 different classes of hazmat, be able to recognize the ones that are more nasty. Table 1s, get a placard for any amount. Table 2s, you have to have more than 1,000 pounds of all these table 2 hazmats combined or whatever before placards are required. Or if you have a bulk package, but if you take a bulk package and weigh it, it's going to be over 1,000 pounds anyway. Okay. So hazard class 1, dynamite is an example of a table 1. 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3s are table 1s. In hazard class 2, think now. There's one table 1. If you have any amount of it, you got to put 4 placards on the truck. Wouldn't it make sense that that would be the black skull one? Okay. Hazard class 3, there's no table 1s. Hazard class 4, it's the pretty blue one, the dangerous when wet. Okay. It doesn't matter how much metal you have. You have just a little bit of metal and you get water on it, it's going to start on fire. Or you're going to have a hard time putting it out. Hazard class 5 Yeah, it's those organic peroxides. I think like class B organic peroxides, the really nasty ones, those are table ones. And by the way, we have all of oxidizers and organic peroxides all over Minnesota. We do a lot of that. Okay. So it's not an unknown. Okay. Hazard class 6, if you got like a rat poison with a white skull, that's a table 2. You'd have to have more than 1,000 pounds before a placard would be required on the truck. But that black skull, that's a table 1 again. Any amount. On radioactives, it's how much on the it's a radioactive with a little red label 3 on it. I don't want to bore you with it, but when it's giving off too much radioactive, um, when it's giving off too much radioactive intensity, for lack of a better word, okay, it's emitting it, then that's what trips the placard. So I gave you the best example I could think of. For cancer treatment, these cars are like running around the middle of the night. You're never going to see them because a lot of times the cancer treatment for radioactive stuff is done early in the morning. Okay. So when they come in, they, no matter how they're bringing them in, I don't care if they're bringing them in a little car, that car is going to have 4 placards on it. And that guy's going to have a CDL. Once it's spent and they go out, they're like nothing. Hazard class 8, there's no table 1s. And class 9, there's no table 1s. Just make sure it's not a lithium battery because you're all going to die. Okay. So that's that DOT chart on that 4th page tells you what the table 1s are. Okay. So now I'm going to come back and we're going to go through this with some pictures. Okay. And then we'll be able to take another break. So you're colorblind. Remember, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry I did that to you, but pretend you're still colorblind. Do you see it on that way in the bottom left-hand corner? You can hardly make out that number 1. True, you can see the 1.4, but you know, you can't even see the 1 on the bottom. Okay. And with explosives, you got to have the name on there. You got to have, you know, a B or a G and a different, you know, there's S's and different ones. The box has to have fireworks and the ID number. Plus, you got to be able to see what kind of box it is. Steve, they're just in a box. They even have closing instructions for the box. You can reuse the box. And you can't combine it with other types of ones. That's why that label becomes so important and the proper name of it. And you can, if you had a good box, you could redo it, tape it shut, and let it go down the road. You can't do that because they didn't, you know, these things can all mix and match. Okay. So there's just an example of hazard class 1. Hazard class 2. I can't even see the label on there. Well, placards are big. They're about a foot, 10 inches. Okay. The labels are small, 4 inches, 3.9. Okay. 4 inches. But then because hazard class 2, compressed gas in cylinders, the package is so good. And it'd be kind of hard to get a 4-inch label on there. Then they get another exemption and they can put those little 1-inch labels on there. Okay. Again, chlorine gas all day long at water treatment facilities. And we have a lot of them we have a lot of cities and we have a lot of lakes and other things that need different kinds of treatments. Okay. So just very popular. So you get a package that's not even in a good shape. Okay. Can you see the difference between a pictogram, which is not a US DOT label? A pictogram is a pictogram for the whole world but it can help to indicate what you're dealing with. The green and the yellow one on there, and hard to see the number on the bottom. I can make it out. That yellow one, that's a 5.1. That's an oxidizer. That's got an oxidizing component in there, in addition to a non-flammable gas, which is the green one. I'm hoping that, Steve, how'd you use the green was non-flammable gas? That's what I'm hoping you can do a better job of. 9 different classes and knowing the numbers on the bottom all the way down to the division numbers. That would be a great way for you to expand your knowledge. And that DOT chart 17 would really help you to work with that. Okay. Now these are in better shape, but can you even find Now the little label is not even 1 inch because now they're even smaller yet. And then they're just in a little box being shipped down the road. Like if you went to hardware store or whatever and you purchase these, the box will have the 4-inch label on it, but you're not going to get it in a box with a compressed gas cylinder in it. You're just going to get people walking up with a Coleman propane thing saying, hey, will you take this? Pretending you don't know anything about hazmat. You can clearly see some pictograms here that help you out a little bit. And I'm telling you, the word extremely flammable on a package is telling you it's going to be a hazmat. It just is. It's going to be a hazmat. Okay. And then if you hadn't found them yet, see this? Yep. Get out the microscope and get out your glasses. They got some exemptions because of the size of the package, but that's going to have the number what on the bottom of it? Not a 1. Try to say it in your mind. It's going to be a 2. Hazard compressed gas in a cylinder. That is not a leak at the head where maybe a valve is open a little bit on a refrigerant, which is the green one, non-flammable gas 2.2. That is a potential failure on a compressed gas cylinder. Walk out of the room, go get a candy bar and a pop and tell your boss about it. I wouldn't go anywhere near that, and I would not handle that package because it's telling you it might, well, it's hissing. Okay, it's a non-flammable gas. The oxygen isn't going to care. Mother Nature's not going to care. If it's off in the corner or away from the building, let it leak itself all the way out. And then, because by the time someone gets there, if you end up getting a contractor for that, that would be fine. Okay. But if it's just bleeding itself out, maybe the best thing on that one is just leave it alone, let it bleed itself out. You don't want to handle it because you don't want the package to fail, because that's like what going off? That would be like a really big grenade going off. That would be almost like a tank round or an artillery unit going off. That would be pretty big. Hazard class 3. Home grade adhesives, which are still a flammable liquid. I know it's a paste, but it's a flammable liquid. Okay. Home grade ones, adhesives and paints, are not generally regulated by the Department of Transportation. How would I know that? You look up whatever's on the package, ethyl methyl Gertrude, and you look it up under an SDS sheet and go to line number 14, and it'll tell you if it's regulated or not. Okay. So this one, generally speaking, the contractor grade adhesives and paints are regulated by the DOT. And you just got to use an MSDS sheet to figure it out. Now that's probably entering more of the world of what you get. Some of the packages are good, some are not. We just dump them all in a bin. We do a pre-transportation function, and then we ship it out of here with Veolia. That's fine. You just got to still make sure that it's all a hazard class 3, however you want to do that. But that's probably more your world. I'm telling you that if you could zoom in on this picture, a lot of these could be regulated by the DOT and some could not. If you guys mix and match them, that's kind of up to you. Okay. Again, looks like a gas can, but how do you know what's in it? Maybe it would be good to just ask a couple of additional questions about that. It's just oil with a little bit of diesel and a little bit of gasoline. Okay, you want to hear the word gasoline because now you have a much higher flammable component or potential on that. Okay. Why is there no number on the bottom of what looks like a label? Placards are big, labels are small. Placards are generally about 1 foot, 10 inches. Labels are small, about 4 inches, 3.9. And 1 inch by the time you get them on cylinders, and even smaller than that when you get down to aerosols. Why don't I see a number on the bottom of that? Because it's not a placard and it's not a label. It's a marking. A marking is for like a low grade hazmat that they still kind of want identified as a hazmat. It doesn't pose a lot of danger. It could even be maybe a class 9, or maybe it's a class 3 flammable liquid with a very, very little amount of a flammable component. But maybe it has enough alcohol in it or whatever that they're going to make it a hazmat still. When you go to line 14, how would you know? Because you would look up whatever that says, prime guard power blast. You would look that up and then go to line 14, and it's going to tell you what it is. But the limited quantity marking, which does not have a number on it, is just kind of saying, don't hit this with a forklift and be kind of careful with it. Once a hazmat has a limited quantity marking on it, in the Department of Transportation world, you could have a whole truck full of it. And you don't need any placards. You don't even need shipping papers unless it's going by air. Okay. You pretty much need the markings on it, orientation arrows if needed. And by, see that right there? That box was spun around. You got to have that marking, and that's pretty much it. And it should be secured. So when you guys receive stuff like this, maybe you do something similar like that. Because I know you probably do PCBs and tires and different things too, where you're just kind of having them in their own area. But that's the limited quantity marking, which does not have a number on the bottom, so it doesn't tell you what hazard class it is. If you really want to know what hazard class is, you got to do a little bit more digging by looking everything up. But it is telling you that it's a hazmat. Okay? So you're telling me that windshield wiper fluid? Yeah, it could be. I don't know. It depends on the windshield wiper fluid. It might be a hazmat, might not be. Here's hazard class 4. Remember the little matchstick? Okay, so I know that's flammable solids, but remember the word flammable solid is not required to be on that label or placard. You see the number 4 on the bottom. Okay. And I just want to do this slide because this is all hazard class 4, showing you that, like, here's dangerous when wet, but then that's what it looks kind of weird when all of a sudden you don't see dangerous when wet on there. Most of them have the words on there, but not all of them do. And the pretty blue one, they let you do it in white and black. They let you do it in either color. Okay. So I just like this one because for a teaching standpoint to hazmat people, it just gives you a little bit better understanding on how they can change slightly. Okay. Or whether they were made in like another country and they're completely not legitimate. But you do see the number 4 on all the bottom of them. You got to be a little bit more research to know that that's the 4.1. That's the spontaneous combustible 4.2. And this is the 4.3 because they do have divisions. These are table 2s. That's a table 2. That's the blue one is a table 1. Okay. So for this one, we get a little story. That's an oxidizer. Oxygen on steroids, 5.1. For your facility, maybe you handle this enough that you know that oxidizers should not be by corrosives, okay? But they can be in the same truck. They just don't want them like directly next to each other. So that's more of a DOT thing, but again, that might be something that you need to know. And how would you know that? You would go to in the hazmat book. It would just, 177.848. Okay, I'm a nerd. That's where the segregation tables are for explosives and for separation, and segregation tables for explosives and for all the other different hazmats. But on this particular example, you can see that we got a problem up here. They had a fire there. And on the bottom, the placard, it's hard to see, but that is a number 2. Okay? Compressed gas cylinders. So what is the problem? Oopsies, that's supposed to be class 3 flammable liquids, and the driver made a mistake. Okay. Now, in the end result, it really didn't matter because nobody didn't get hurt. Okay. But even though you're seeing, remember, flammable gas, corrosive, oxidizer are not required. 5.18, maybe your brain's going, oh, we got to put those in different areas in our facility. Cool. For me, is that really hazard class 2? Are we going to have little missiles going off with this fire? Okay. So it ended up, it was really class 3. And all that happened is that the tires locked up and then they went on fire. And then there happened to be a wood floor for the deck of the trailer, which happened to get on fire. And then apparently they had bad load securement and these things were flopping around in there. And one of the after they had a fire, and they had some leaking with the flammable liquid, hazard class 3, they got just a itty bitty fire in there, which got to be a bigger fire, which burned the plastic pail of the oxidizer. And then that's like 15 minutes later. Nobody gave a clap or a thumbs up for that picture. Nobody? Sheepers. They're all sleeping. Whoa. Yeah. Oxidizers is oxygen on steroids. So you got a fire, run for your life. Okay. Oxidizers can be by corrosives. They need to be separated. And oopsies, we had now nothing I think would have really changed this event and nobody got hurt. But if you would have had cylinders in there, you would have had a little bit of a wood fire of the wood floor. I think the cylinders probably would have been okay. I'm not guaranteeing it, but if they were all tight and none of them were leaking, they probably would have been okay. So hazmat is just not about the hazmat. It's about the package that it's in. And when you folks receive bad packages, that's what you got to pay a little bit more attention to. And that's the whole purpose of the training today. Okay, I'm going to do this one now. I'll take another break. Yay. So again, using your skills. Now for me, this was in the back of a truck and you just got to kind of pay attention a little bit. We had a bunch of white pails, but it was not a violation to have a white poison label on a white bucket. Okay. And I'm just happy that, I mean, those were unsecured. That's a no-no in our world. Okay. And when it's being transported down the road, but you don't see the black skull. Hazard class 6. Now this one goes PG3, which is another exemption on top of an exemption on top of an exemption. But basically this is going to be a liquid or solid poison. And if it was a liquid or solid inhalation hazard, that white would be a black skull. So someone brings you in a pail all day long, and probably white pails all day long. But there's nothing wrong with spinning them around so that you know exactly with what you're getting. And maybe they put it in a poison pail, but they don't actually have the poison in it. Well, those are good questions on your end. So let's take a break and come back sharp at 3 o'clock to continue on. We are now at hazard class 6. Well, I knew that, Steve. I can see the 6 on the bottom of that placard. Now, on the packages, you can have labels or placards, but when they get really big, they should be on 2 opposite sides. Okay? So it's allowed to have a bigger label, for lack of a better word, but that is the size of the placard. The fact that he was missing them on the truck, didn't have shipping papers, didn't have a hazmat endorsement, that's a whole different story. But again, we have a hazard class 6. We have a white skull, less of a concern. Normally, we just want a better package. Now, totes with this cage protection and the thicker plastic, we don't really as much have a package in a package, but kind of sort of in that we're caging in a tote with a really good plastic. And that's kind of what Hazard Class 6 does. They offer better packages, and that's why they're all the way down at a Hazard Class 6. Okay. The Black Skull Inhalation Hazard Class 6s, again, generally have more indicators, more communications on them. Like, for example, it has to say inhalation hazard right on the outside of the truck as well, so that people know what's on the inside of the truck. And even though you might not be able to zoom in, I mean, again, that's kind of the point of the exercise. You got a white, you got a white label with a black thing on top. It's that simple. Now, for an exercise for your brain, is that hazard class 2 a compressed gas in a cylinder? No, that's a drum. So it's going to be a liquid or a solid. So I know on the bottom that label is going to be a hazard class 6. If it was a compressed gas cylinder, that'd be a hazard class 2. On packages, if you have subsidiary hazards, in other words, additional hazard classes that also are associated with that product that add an additional risk component above and beyond the major one, they have to be added to that. I think chlorine gas, I think, is a Black Skull 2. And then I think they also have the oxidizer and the corrosive one on there. Trying to remember off the top of my head. But you do get additional communications on the Black Skull too. Here's your proper shipping name. Now, again, you're going to look this up on an MSDS sheet. You're not looking up acrolein, okay? You're looking up acrolein, comma, stabilized. Unless you had a damaged package, then you got to use a little bit more of your thinking skills. Well, I clearly see 1092, so I'm going to go look up the ID name in an emergency response guidebook and let it tell me what the proper shipping name is. Because this is an inhalation hazard, this is an additional marking communication. So placards are big, labels are small. They always have a number on the bottom of them. Markings are things like ID numbers, names, and other things like maybe orientation arrows or inhalation hazard that give you additional information about that product. So we went from a Black Skull to a White Skull. Similar, right? Because they both also had a hazard class 3. Similar, but in my mind, not as dangerous as a Black Skull. Okay? But look at the drum. You got a steel drum here. And let me tell you, that closure, that's a removable head, but there's closure instructions that like if that bolt or screw was loose or that rim was loose in any way, that truck is out of service, and that's a nasty ticket. Okay, for us going down the road. Okay, for you, we can't see the top of it on there, but generally it's like a twist off cap, and it's going to be in a plastic one. So again, the dangerous hazmats, they generally want a better package. Okay, good example of your hazardous waste. Now, in that EPA world, I think they call that a label. All right. The point being is that where we might call that more of like a marking, or it's additional information. Okay. That is our labels right there, our USDOT labels. So here's an example of like a cancer patient. So actually got a phone call on this one in the middle of the night because it was parked behind a bank and the officer was nervous. So we got a picture in the next morning, but I asked the officer, so you're by a bank and you got this, okay, but notice the the company name, the company DOT number. They had a little annual inspection decal here. When the officer had the driver open up the door, the shipping papers and emergency response information were there. That's a communication. The shipping paper and emergency response information are communications. 4 different placards, that's a communication. Now you open up the back door. Here's this little package with labels on it, and the label had a little Roman numeral red 3 on it, which means it's emitting a lot of radioactive. So we're glad that the driver's not going down the road sitting on it, right? So he has it in the back, and his load securement was a seatbelt in a package with a label on it and additional markings on it telling us what it is. And in the radioactive world, they even got to write down how much hazmat it's emitting. No violations. But you folks don't see that much. But might you find an empty radioactive package that somehow ends up at your facility? Yeah. So I just like to walk through this to help you explain it a little bit. And why are they all the way down by 7? Because it's in a package, and you're not going to break the package. Just how it is. Hazard class 8. For us on the roadside, this guy's got a problem. But if you look at the ones in the back, that might be more like what it's like in your storage facility or when it goes out, for shipment, because it is going to be regulated at that point. I don't know if you can see the blue on the bottom of the screen, but I literally just, took different, I think I looked up mothballs on this one. Maybe someone can clap or give me a thumbs up. I think I did it right. I think I just looked up mothballs. UN 3077, environmentally hazardous substance. It's just kind of a environmentally hazardous. What is it? Okay. It's an environmentally hazardous substance. It's all the way down at hazard class 9, not otherwise specified. Okay. And when you see the I, it's not otherwise indicated, kind of sort of the same thing. But okay. But this is all part of what that product is if you look that up in a hazmat book. Okay. And you could also find that on line 14. Okay. And then it was hazard class 9, and it was a packing group 3. Classing group 1 is a more serious hazmat, and generally it's a better package. Okay. 2 is kind of medium, and 3 is the lowest. By the way, gasoline is a flammable liquid, hazard class 3. Its packing group is 2. Diesel is packing group 3 because it poses less of a danger. Okay. And lithium batteries, just a picture. You folks are probably the experts on this, and you do it all day long. It's a hazard class 9. I wish it was 10. Because I don't like them lumping that with that. Because if you have a problem with arcing and they get on fire, just get out of the building. It's my recommendation. And again, is your brain going, I don't see a number on the bottom. So that's not a placard or a label. It's a marking. And for us, if it's secured in the truck with the limited quantity marking and orientation arrows if needed, so that's telling you it's a package in a package. You have bottles in a box. And you see the orientation arrows because you're not looking at a 55-gallon barrel drum. You're not looking at a pail. So they have to tell you that you have a combination package of a package in a package. So even though I'm making this up, let's say this is a hazard class 8. I'm just making this up, okay? Or a 3, okay? Because they put it in a package, in a box, they put it in a package, that might have allowed them to get away with the limited quantity marking and orientation arrows. Now they don't need anything else other than securement in the truck. They don't need shipping papers. They don't need anything. But it is because they put it in a better package. Okay? So for you folks too, it's, how when you receive it, you might have to do a little bit more research on the MSDS sheet to figure out what you got. Okay. A little bit wordy. Sorry about that. I'll just talk out loud. You can read the slide if you want. Materials of trade it is a hazmat, but it's a hazmat that poses less danger, kind of sort of like limited quantity. So it gets exemptions. But under what conditions? Well, you're not selling it. Now, again, you're going to just have people bringing stuff in. But you could have a commercial motor vehicle in commerce bringing in materials of trade. Like what? Like a gas can. Okay. So if it supports the driver, the operator, the vehicle, like bug spray and aerosol cans, starting fluid to help old Betsy start up, and gas can for a lawnmower business. If it supports the company operations, basically, the driver, the vehicle, or the company operations, and it does not do really nasty hazmats. So you don't see any table ones here. You don't have to study this. Just look at it. You don't see any table ones here. And I'm telling you, you're not going to get to do an inhalation hazard. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. You're not doing a class 1, no explosives. Okay. The only amount of 4.3 that you can do in a dangerous when wet, it's like 1 ounce. It's a really small amount. Okay. And you don't see any inhalation hazards here, black skull. So it's only supporting basically the business operations, only certain hazmats, and in smaller amounts and smaller packages. So let me just highlight this one here. A low let's do this one. If it's like a cylinder, like propane or oxygen, the biggest a cylinder can be is 220 pounds. Those are the ones that are about the size of your body. A little bit bigger than what you'd see like with an ambulance, where they have them in the side, or in a acetylene and oxygen tank for like a welding business. Okay. The packages are a little bit bigger, but the total amount that you get for everything is 440 pounds. I'm sorry, I forgot to highlight that. The total amount you can get is 440 pounds. So you're not even close to 1,000 pounds. You get up to 440 pounds of the different hazmats, but it's generally speaking, it's table 2 hazmats in smaller packages, smaller amounts, like a gas can. Okay. Now, again, just view. So like a government employee, like, let's just say it was like, you guys are like taking it like a snowplow guy. He picks up something on the side of the road. He's a government. So they're not commerce. Okay. And they're exempt from the regs. And now he's dropping it off to your facility. We're not going to regulate him. He's going to be kind of like the guy bringing in his propane tank that's bad from his propane grill at home. Okay. But they're still subject to Minnesota state statutes, like you should wear your seatbelt and you shouldn't be speeding. Okay. You don't want this stuff falling on the road. Okay. But when it becomes in commerce, okay, then that's when we're going to get into the regulations. And again, to just help out with a couple of pictures, I don't think that you folks will be handling sharps, but see, again, you end up with they get out of a lot of the regulations too, like the limited quantity marking that doesn't have a number on the bottom of it, like materials of trade, because they get out of shipping papers and emergency response information. Just smaller packages. Just has to be secured. Well, sometimes like even the 6.2 stuff, the biohazard stuff, a package, they get a lot of exemption from the regulations. It still has to be secured. Okay. And why did you get pulled into this training to begin with today? Because even just handling it and receiving it, and possibly where you put it in your facility, which is like separating it and segregating it. Okay. Those are called pre-transportation functions. And you're part of the process. Sorry, now you got pulled into additional training. Okay. And then what do you have to do when you're actually like a generator, you're helping to compile all this stuff and getting it ready to be shipped out by, say, like a Veolia or something like that. Again, maybe you're doing a very little amount. Maybe you're one of those people that actually helps with the shipping papers. Well, we want this properly classed. There's 9 different classes of hazmat. I spent a lot of time on that. Properly packaged. I've got some more pictures coming up here, but because you're going to get these packages in all different shape, recognizing that it might have the hazard class might have been deteriorated on the label. So you got to lose a little bit of your experience, okay? And then when it goes out, it will have to have the proper marking or label on it, potentially placard. If I don't know if some of you I do know have totes in your facility. Okay. The definition of a bulk package is greater than 119 gallons. If your tote is greater than 119 gallons, that's a bulk package, and that truck will also have to automatically have a placard. Okay. A 55-gallon barrel drum is not bigger than 119 gallons. So it's not a bulk package. But by the time you get to about 3 55-gallon barrel drums, mostly full, they're going to weigh more than 1,000 pounds, which could cause that truck to be placarded. I don't know how many of you are doing shipping papers, but you should have a little bit of knowledge about what the proper shipping name is and that ID number to tip you off on what could potentially be transported, or for your own safety as it comes in. And the definitions of hazardous materials also includes if it's a hazardous substance, okay? So it might not be in the hazardous materials table, but if it's like a marine pollutant, or it's a waste, okay, or a hazardous substance, it still can get pulled in to the regulations. I don't know that I want to do this, but again, we're digging into the weeds a little bit, but there's additional identification things that have to go on the shipping paper when a particular product in one package exceeds a certain number. Then they want an RQ designated on the shipping paper, which just stands for that it exceeds a reportable quantity. Basically, we just want a little bit more additional communication that we got not so much a nasty hazmat, but a lot of a hazmat going down the road. And so they have you put an RQ, which is a communication, on the package. Okay. So there's very few of you that might get involved with this, but in the PCB world, things like that can happen easily. Okay. Again, recognizing that today, I didn't mean to confuse you and do a whole lot of definitions, but the EPA can have a slightly different definition of a haz waste. What I kind of talked about today was more, your MSDS sheet and what of the 9 different classes that you get it into. You're going to have additional training on your own of, well, what do we do when it's now we're getting a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Now they're mixed together and you have this haz waste. How do we do it? Well, you're going to have to put it possibly in salvage drums, or maybe it's allowed in totes. There might be additional communications that you have to put on it. For example, your communication rather than a shipping paper might be a hazardous waste manifest. Basically, the purpose is the same, but you might have to fill out a little bit more additional information on there of exactly what that haz waste is. Okay. Yeah, it could be a universal waste. It could be regulated in the EPA world. It could be regulated in the DOT world, but not necessarily both. Okay. So just again, if it's in your EPA world, like I think PCBs is the best one that I can come up with. We deal with that less on the road. You folks probably deal with that all the time. Old ballasts from old lights, like fluorescent lights. I think I'm on the right page with that. I already covered this. If you're performing a pre-transportation function, which could be any of those following, we already talked about that. That's kind of what pulls you in to some of this, why we want the training to do today, even if you're just doing a smaller part of it. You could be doing any part of this, none of it, one of it, all of it. Packaging the material, I would say receiving it right off the bat. You're receiving it, and then you're moving it somewhere, possibly packaging it or repackaging it, preparing a shipping paper, checking it for compliance to make sure you have exactly what you say that you're having, marking the package and labeling the package. You probably would not get involved with placarding the truck, but remember, a placard can also go on a bulk package like a tote, and making sure there's emergency response information on there. I don't think that you're necessarily, once you're in your loading dock, you're in the loading dock. You primarily making sure that you got, even if you're putting a lot of these packages, are you putting them in a weak cardboard box or a big cardboard box the size of the tote? I mean, that's kind of on you, but it's the same as similar to, as long as it's secured going down the road. Well, as long as you have secure containers and you're separating them the way you should, then you've probably done it as much as you're going to be able to do in your facility, but you still need to consider that. Okay. And use some smart with it. We're talking about when it goes down the road, clover leaves all day long. When something's not secured, and the four leaf, the clovers and the transportation that we have a lot of in the metro area, that's a rollover every single time. Well, same thing in your loading dock. Is your forklift easy and your, little dollies and stuff, and you're moving this stuff around? Maybe you need to consider where you're staging this stuff and how you're moving it to making sure that the packages aren't failing, because the packages are probably already compromised. You think you got a packet number 2, you think you got a really bad package, maybe you separate that with that group and just say, hey, this needs to be repackaged. There's no way that this will be an authorized package going down the road the way it is. An oxygen bottle, no matter how hard you close it, it's still, it's a hazard class 2. It's just oxygen, but it just keeps on hissing. We can't get it to close. No, that's an unauthorized package. You do what you're going to do. Take it out back and bleed it off or do whatever. But you don't want to have a package that is leaking or doing anything that it shouldn't be doing. I'm just showing here, again, an example of different things that EPA wants and the hazardous waste, whether you call it a label or a marking, however you want to say that, adding that to the package. Recognize that, again, this is more OSHA stuff, but it can really help to tip you off as to what you're dealing with, especially if the DOT label or markings were missing. These are called pictograms. They can help, but and immensely help you with your job. That doesn't, but they're not part of US DOT compliance. In other words, when we have something like that on there, we're not making them do that. That's the OSHA is going to do that. Okay. But having those on there can tip us off if we're missing a DOT. Like there's a corrosive one right on there. Top right. See how it even looks the same? I would imagine once they got the corrosive pictogram on there, it's probably required to have class 8, the corrosive label on there. So it could be a good tip off. That's just an example of showing you how the different categories are broken out. I got a little bit more into the weeds on this one. 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3, they're the table ones. You're not even going to be receiving those, okay? But you might be receiving 1.4, 1.5, and 1.6. 1.4 is kind of like your your home grade fireworks. So you could be receiving that. What you do with it is up to your facility's process. Hazard class 2, compressed gases. Now I'm trying to get your brain to link what they all look like. 2.3 is your black skull, is your table 1. Not to confuse you. See, remember I said non-bulk package, 119, greater than 119 gallons is a bulk package. Okay. Diesel, which has a lower flash point. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Let me start all over. Gasoline has a flash point of like 100 or less. Okay. We're always going to regulate that. It might get out of placarding on the vehicle, but we're always going to regulate that. Diesel in a non-bulk package, we don't even regulate it. We just don't. If it's leaking and falling off from a truck, we will. But diesel in a non-bulk package is not even regulated by the DOT. We don't care. Gasoline is always regulated. You better have a secure gas can. We'll allow you to put it in a gas can, and it should say gasoline on there, which is a common shipping name or marking. Okay. We'll let you do that. It'll get exemptions. Okay. But it's still in the regulations. 5 or 6 gallon can of diesel, we don't regulate at all unless it was leaking or it fell off your truck. Hazard class 4, just kind of read them on your own and go through it in your mind. Big test coming up at the end of the day. Not. 4.1, look at the 1. 4.1, the 1, matchstick. Matchstick. That's how I remember that. I remember 4.3. That's the pretty blue one. What do you got left? Spontaneous combustible. That's 4.2. Oxygen on steroids for oxidizers. They can really, if you have a problem with the package and it starts mixing with other stuff, you're going to have a big problem. The red one on the organic peroxides can be bad for your body, especially when they have the type B temperature controlled ones. These can become table 1s. Did you pick out the black skull right away? Now we're talking about poisons that are, and again, you can say poison or toxic. So you might get a package that's a little bit different. That's allowed. Okay. They got a 6 on the bottom. They're going to be a liquid or a solid. But the black skull, don't get a whiff of it. Hazard class 6 continued, the 6.2 gets into your more infectious materials. It's mostly markings. That's it. A lot of times, you're not going to see E. boli on the package. The package that says E. boli is going to be in a box. And all you're going to see is the biohazard marking on the box. And they don't want people freaking out. So they put the package in a package in a package. Okay. And you're never even going to see that it's E. boli or whatever. But you will get things that come in with that orange biohazard marking on there. Okay. I don't think you're going to be dealing with any of this. Again, it just gives you a little bit of awareness if you get some sort of crazy box that people bring in and drop off and say, hey, we don't know what this is or whatever. Can you see the little red 3? Somebody clap if you can see the little red 3 on there. Okay. So this, a little bit of radioactive stuff is coming out, a little bit more radioactive. When they measure it and they mark on there how much radioactive activity is giving off from that package, it's the red 3 that trips the placards. Okay. So again, you can generally handle radioactive packages. You just want it to be in a good package. And they're really, really, really good packages. I think it's just more often that you're going to be getting maybe packages with nothing in them, like again, for the cancer patient ones, and you're going to wonder what to do with it. Mostly bad for the skin, and they got to put it in different containers based on what type of corrosive. That's the toughest thing about corrosives is there's a wide range of how corrosive they can be. Definitions can be slightly different. Hazard class 9, environmentally hazardous substance. What? Hazardous waste. What? Like, what is it? Okay. But it's just miscellaneous stuff that we're allowed to have a kind of a generic name, but we do want to know, is it a liquid or a solid? It's not otherwise specified, or it's not otherwise indicated. Hazard class 9. Okay. This one should, if it was on a shipping paper, should be the ID number, name, hazard class, packing group. Keeping in mind that that could also be lithium batteries. You're allowed to do this on hazard class 2s, and you can even put shrink wrap over it. A lot of times we get pink shrink wrap, and if they pink shrink wrap this over and over and over, now the label disappears and you can't see it. Then the label has to go on the outside. So we just kind of broke off on some, like on when we're talking about our general topics in the beginning, 9 classes. Now we're kind of into some packaging and looking at some of the different packaging and packaging requirements. In your packaging, you're going to have a non-bulk package or a bulk package. And your product is going to be a liquid, a solid, or a gas. This is a limited quantity marking. There's no number on the bottom of it, and that can go on the package. And if you have a liquid inside a box, it would also have to have the orientation arrow markings on there. This ORMD is not even allowed anymore, but you might still be getting the packages like that. It's all now limited quantity. That's what is supposed to be on the package. Okay. When it has a Y on it, that just simply means that it goes by air. Why didn't they put an A on there? I don't know. Y means at some point it's either going out for air, or in your case, it's already gone out by air, and that's just what ended up on the package, because that's how it was received or delivered to whoever. If you are dealing with shipping papers and you get to look at the packing group 1, 2, or 3, again, I'm just writing this out now so you can visualize and see it. Packing group 1 means it's a lot more danger. You might see more like a steel drum, or a much heavier plastic, or a heavier plastic bottle in a box. It's because it's about the hazmat and the package that it's in. But again, when it comes to you, you just might get a bottle. You're not getting the box anymore. They're just bringing it to you in a bottle. But packing group 1 means it does pose more of a greater danger. 2 is medium, and 3 is less danger. So you might go from a steel drum to a plastic drum to maybe a plastic bottle, because a plastic barrel is going to be a lot heavier plastic than just like on a plastic bottle. We get that all from this area here. This whole number 8 area is where we're figuring out what kind of package that goes in. So you folks, a little bit more paying attention to, if you had a hazmat book and you're looking it up, you just kind of want to know what's the name, what's the hazard class, and what's that ID number. But in a hazmat table book, the packing group is right after that. And this label column tells you every label that has to be on there. So again, if you were looking at just a placard on a truck, this one would have just an 8. But on the package itself, it would have an 8 and a number 3. Remember that black inhalation, black 55-gallon barrel drum that we looked at? Well, that had a subsidiary on it. So that's why on the package you saw 2 different labels. These are things that we have to get into more for a roadside inspection. But if someone says to you, no, put that in that steel bin, or no, don't put that in that tote, put it in the cage tote, They're telling you because they know that that maybe needs to go into a better package, even if it's just sitting in your facility. That can become very important. This slide is just trying to point out, more extra caution on the residue, because again, if they're not properly closed, okay, you're going to be getting stuff with leakage on it all day long. We get that less in the transportation world. You have to become more of the expert. Is that an old leak or is it still leaking? Packaging instructions. Salvage drums. Interesting. See how this is a good example here. See how this is a non-removable head and this is a removable head. You folks might have smaller packages, not a 55-gallon bear drum, but smaller packages, and they're all kind of leaking. Or if they like that one bin we showed earlier on where we had a whole bunch of little cans and some of them didn't even have a bottom to them. They were all rusted out. Then you might be allowed to put it in a salvage drum, and then you're going to have a removable head so you can get it in there. But that head, now I'm going to go backwards a slide, will even have closure instructions of how much this needs to be torqued down before that goes down the road. Might not be a part of your job, but someone's going to get that job. If it's an aerosol and they're spent, maybe it's different. Maybe you're still just putting them in a drum and you can put the plastic lid on it. But I want you to keep in mind, Mr. Krieger, we actually take these things out and we go on a board and spray off the rest, or, whatever you do with it. Just remember though, that is hazard class. Think about it. Hazard class 2. And there is a potential that one, especially like heated up, that one of those could go boom. I think if you had a really smashed can or a head was broken, I think you would know if it was empty or not. But when you look at that, just think of like a grenade or a little missile. You knock off the head, it's going to be a missile. If you take an average size tank for like an acetylene torch tank or just an oxygen tank, like in a welding truck, and you knock off the head on that thing will go through a concrete wall. It might even go through 2. Okay. So keep in mind that little aerosols, okay, they still can pose a danger. So the big thing is the placard, not a label, and it has a number on it. Why don't we have to see the names on a lot of them? Because when there's a bulk package on the inside or a cargo tank, that's where we put the ID number. We don't see the UN or the NA. That's because it's not required. It's required on a non-bulk package, but not on a bulk package or cargo tank. So here's the placard, which includes these, in this case, the stripes, or see that for the corrosive, black on the bottom, and the number 8, the number 9, the number 3. The marking, the ID marking is that. And when you look up that will say diesel or fuel oil. Okay. And if you go to the gas station today and you see someone on your way home and it says 1203, go look up 1203. That stands for gasoline. In 1987 and stuff like that, that's going to be your ethanol blends. So today, what we hit pretty hard on when we're communicating this is the placarding, the marking, and labeling. Tried to give you a bunch of different examples of it, keeping in mind that you folks might have to do a hazardous waste manifest rather than a shipping paper. And you might also want to put that hazardous waste marking or label by EPA on the package. Hazardous waste manifest. Steel drum, removable head. I don't like how that stuff is leaking or whatever. There's your label. there. That could be satisfying DOT or EPA. 55-gallon barrel drums are considered non-bulk packages. By the time you get 3 of them, it might be over 1,000 pounds, and now you got to put a placard on the truck. So RMD is not used anymore, but you're probably going to be, because now they just use that, the limited quantity marking, but you're still going to probably get a lot of boxes that say that. Right now, I'm just showing you a lot of different pictures. So now I would like to have, maybe you don't have to do this, but if you want to put a question in the chat now, go ahead. If you got a question that you're just begging to ask. Because again, to go above and beyond what my purpose was today, which was to get you more rock solid on the 9 classes, understanding the potential danger and different communications which might be there or missing. I mean, that was mostly what I wanted to do today. You could put a question in the chat anyway, just in case, maybe I'm doing a bad job explaining. I don't know. Seeing none, I will continue on.
We just
So
got
remember that a
question.
hazard class.
We
Okay.
do have a couple of questions in the chat now.
Okay.
Would you like me to read them, Steve, or do you
Yeah,
have
why don't you read
access?
them to me, because I'm not really in as good of a position to be viewing the chat at the same time.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, so the first question, I think it was referring to maybe an image you had up previously. So this package should not be allowed because it looks like a HM label. The green label with the hanger.
Oh, yeah. So we, in the DOT world, I don't know if you folks would have to deal with this as much, but in the DOT world, we can't, you have to have certain distances from the labeling and the placarding and the markings so that it doesn't all blend together. And so, in other words, a lot of big green stuff right next, and then on top of it, that's in the shape of a label, and it's not even a placard or a label. So in this case, a label. And there's actually a regulation that says you can't do that. And I would just, in our world, cheapest hazmat ticket is $385. Now for me, I would write the violation. I would do some information and education on it. For you, okay, let's use this and break off on this a little bit. I also was on a volunteer fire department for 13 years. Let's go for funds. Okay. Now, when you have that, what size is it? Out loud or think it. What size of a label? Oh, you have a fire. Now we kind of see a yellow label. The fire department is, because your car's on fire, maybe you're jammed in there, maybe your kids are in the back. Do you want the fire department to delay even a half a second because they saw a label on there? Is, I don't know, is that an oxygen? Is it an oxidizer? You don't. I like those baby on ones. Get a little, but if someone asked me about it, I take a chance to talk to them about it. It's not really a violation, not in commerce, but it was kind of a silly that just went off because of social media or whatever. But I don't think it's cute, because I've had to deal with burnt bodies and babies that are dead and nasty, nasty things. And so it's one of those things that I wish it never really would have happened. Now we're looking at a green one with coat hangers. I mean, really, who cares? I just wanted, but in the DOT world, it's actually prohibited. In your world, I just don't want things like that to throw you for a loop. I think by now, with all the hammering that I've done, you guys have said, if you find something that's in a diamond shape, look for the bottom, and that'll tell you what hazard class it is, 1 through 9. If you don't see anything on the bottom, it's probably black and white, and that's probably a limited quantity marking, which is telling you it's a hazmat, but it's a really low grade hazmat. Which one is it? I don't know. We got to look it up on an MSDS sheet. So that's all that one is. Now let's go on to the next chat.
Okay, Steve, your audio.
I like that one.
Your audio is breaking up a little bit for me, so I don't know if it might help to turn your camera off, or hopefully that is resolved, but I think we caught kind of some of that answer, but maybe not the whole thing, unless it's me. The next question is, how many violations are recorded annually in Minnesota?
I can't answer that, but I can tell you the main ones are placarding, labeling, marking, shipping papers, and load securement. Every time, all day long. All the communications that I talked about today, which includes shipping papers, are all, and then the only other weird one is load securement. But you folks have to make sure that, in the building, that's why I talked a little bit about, walkways and pathways, so that you're not accidentally hitting the boxes and damaging them, because that would be a load securement problem. You don't want to damage these packages. So the violations that we get on the road are all communications all day long. They're the big ones.
Okay, audio was better there. So I think we're good. And then one last question in the chat. Do we have any indication when or if lithium batteries will be reclassified under DOT?
Yeah, I just came from a hazmat conference, and so did Dan in Texas. I can't answer that question. Everybody brought up the same, everybody's bringing up the same concerns, but it's a big political thing as well. I mean, I am not being wrong by saying, if you have a Tesla fire, which is, I'm not picking on Tesla, I'm just using it as an example of well, let me back up a little bit. What was the genius of Tesla? If you take a really, really big battery, it'll work, but the vehicle or the truck becomes so heavy, it's not efficient. And you transport less product so that you're not overweight. The genius of Tesla is that you take a whole bunch of little batteries, like 1,000 or more, and then you have them in these little compartments, and then network them all together with a computer, so that if one accidentally fails or goes bad, it just kind of shuts itself down and you're good. But the little filaments and the things separating them, even on your own cell phone, is so small That's why, like on an airplane, if you drop your cell phone in the seat, that's why they want the stewardess to get it. Because if you pinched it in the seat and you damage that, your little cell phone is going to be a runaway fire, and you can't stop it. I'm sure if you YouTubed it, you could probably find some of your own videos. So going back to the lithium batteries and how they can just be runaway fires, yeah, there's a lot of concern with this because, first of all, the technology is just exploding. Nobody can keep up with it, and we're getting more and more fires. For public safety, it's a personal opinion. I wish they'd put it in a separate hazard class rather than just throwing it into hazard class 9, because it's not a couple of ones. It's just like it's taking over the world as far as for how much of these we're going to use. But that isn't anything close to a miscellaneous environmentally hazardous substance that you have to put a limited quantity marking on for hazard class 9. It's so far beyond that. So nobody knows where it's going. A lot of talk about it. Unfortunately, it'll probably take a couple of really bad incidents before people decide what to do with it. I mentioned it to you for your own safety and caution. If you had a tote or a box or a bin and you knew they were all cell phones, and you hear a pop and you look and you see flame over there, I would get out. I would completely get out and go call 911. That's what I would do, because there's really nothing you can do to stop that thing. It's just going to burn. It's a great question. No answer.
All right. Thanks, Steve. That's all for the chat questions.
Beautiful. I give everybody an A+. And thank you for interacting with me. So now, in kind of finishing up, whether these were placards or labels. Now, the first one, well, first of all, that doesn't really look orange to me in the upper left, but you should be finding division numbers. Like if you get fireworks coming in, there should be a division number, and I'm hoping it's going to say 1.4 or 1.5 or 1.6, okay? On hazard class, but you're not required to necessarily see the division number on there, okay? So for the explosives, being that it's hazard class 1, they make you kind of put it on the placard in the middle or kind of towards the bottom. But on hazard class 2, they don't do it. And they don't do it on 3, and they don't do it on 4. You have to just know that, say, for example, the non-flammable gas is 2.2. 2.1 is a flammable gas. And the inhalation hazard, the black skull, is 2.3. Flammable solids, you just have to kind of know that it's a 4.1. Spontaneous combustible is 4.2. Dangerous wet, the pretty blue one, is 4.3, which is a table 1. They do it on the 5s. Radioactives would have additional information on it. And hazard class 8 and 9 doesn't have division numbers on it either. But just be aware that there are division numbers. You have 9 classes, but some have additional division numbers. So, like looking at this one here, 2.3, whether it says inhalation or poison gas, kind of want your brain going, that's supposed to be a black skull. PIH over here stands for poison inhalation hazard in our world. That should be a black skull. You won't really see 4.3 on here, but that's a table 1. And the type B temperature controlled one would have red on the top. So again, this was just kind of like a little exercise to help you, again, that, the going through the 9 classes, getting out that DOT chart 17 on your own, and just going over that over and over and looking at the pictures of the placards and labels. I feel sitting at home with popcorn, watching a movie, and just getting really good at looking at all the different 9 classes. I think for your own safety is just extremely helpful, because in a heartbeat, people are coming and they're dropping it off and look at this and look at this. And I got this in my trunk. You want your eyes to be really good at looking at the bottom. There's nothing wrong with picking up on the color, but also make sure you look at the bottom number. It's kind of just reviewing the materials of trade. If you get a packing group 1 and it's really, really nasty hazmat, they're not going to let you have very much of it at all. Actually, this is not even a table 1. That's just regular stuff. They don't want you having a lot of it. When you get like a packing group 2 or 3, like a gasoline or a diesel, okay, like the biggest you can get in a package for the materials of trade exemption is 66 pounds for a solid and 8 gallons for a liquid. That's why even a Walmart won't sell much more than a 5 or 6 gallon gas can. Even though it's not in commerce, they know that when you get too big of a package, you have the potential for too big of a boom. The materials of trade exemption, whether it's coming in or going out, and you're helping it going out, they can receive an exemption and not have to do the shipping papers, but they also don't do it for certain hazmats, basically, mostly speaking, the table 1s. There's an example of a guy using a materials of trade exemption. Well, that's a truck, and it looks kind of like a commercial motor vehicle. This guy's probably got 5 different hazmats on there, but he only has a total of 440 pounds, and he has it in smaller packages. He could even come to a household waste facility and drop stuff off. He's not in violation, even though he is in commerce. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're helping to prepare it going out, we also want you to know you could even it depends on your facility size. Maybe you're just big enough that you get stuff once in a while. And if you had just very small amounts of it, certain kinds, you might not have to do a shipping paper or emergency response information. It's permitted, even though it's in commerce. It's just talking about load securement, which happens for us. We're checking to make sure that when this is going down the road, it's in good shape. When you get packages that come in that might be damaged, I know that's an accident scene, but that are damaged, or there may be missing labels, okay, that you gotta use some of your talents to go through and figure out what those are. Hazard class 2, don't really know, but what's in those bins? Or when we collect stuff out here, what could have ended up in those bins, and now they're bringing it to your facility. The segregation too, it's found in the regs at 177.848, but I don't know that most of you are there, but that's where you go in the regulations if you wanted to find the separation and segregation parts for either the hazmats or for the explosives, and you're not going to be doing the explosives. And when we get to the end, I kind of lumped a lot of these together. But part of the security is, I would hope that your facilities are secure. You've received some training today. Fill out the training, throw it in a folder, you know what I mean, and keep track of your training. So at least you're having some sort of hazmat training, okay? And know that, you can call the state duty officer for like bigger incidents. 911 is more for law enforcement and the fire department. The state duty, they can also get the hold of the state duty officer for you. But the state duty officer is how you get to the persons like myself and Dan, who are the hazmat specialist, or the state fire marshal, or Minnesota Pollution Control. That's how you get a hold of them. Okay. I can't make you do this, but when I do abandoned container for the MnDOT people that are on the road picking up this stuff, especially if you're a supervisor, I think you should have the state duty officer number in your phone. Again, you can always call 911, primarily for law enforcement and EMS, ambulance or fire response. Okay. And you could even ask to get transferred to the duty officer. But calling the state duty officer in the hazmat world is how you get a hold of someone like, Dan or I. Okay. Or the state fire marshal or something like that. This can be up to a 4-hour course, and we've only done about 3 hours. Okay. What I would like to do is I would like to take you back to this main page to see if that can prompt a few questions about the 9 different classes. Can in a chat could up a number, like a number 10 to you, Michelle? Or can they only do like hand clapping and things like that?
They can raise their hand and unmute to ask questions.
Oh, I got an idea, since people are being a little bit. How many total people are attending right now? Like 30 something?
32.
Okay. How about if I ask a question and because we're not keeping track of this, don't worry about it. Just do a thumbs up if you think I'm right. Do a thumbs down if you think I'm wrong. Nobody's keeping track. Nobody cares. Okay. I mean, when you're recording this, would that record them doing that? I suppose it would. It could.
I think in the recording you can see the reactions on the screen, and I don't think we have a thumbs down. So thumbs up, heart, clap,
let's just do it. Well, okay, there's 9 different classes of hazmat. True or false? Okay. All of the 9 different classes of hazmat, all of them also have division numbers. All the hazmats have division numbers. You guys, I'm supposed to be, yeah, there we go. Some of them have division numbers, not all of them. Okay. On all of the hazmats, you must have a name like flammable or corrosive on the placard or label on all of them. You guys are making me laugh with these things. The answer is no, not all of them have it on there. That's why, and that's where, like on a bulk package, the ID number would go. And so that's part of the reason that it's not required. But when you get into some of the nastier ones, like radioactive and the explosives, then an inhalation hazard, they can make you put them on there. When you are unsure about a hazmat, but you're looking at the package, and it's okay to handle, but some of the names and the ID numbers, you're not finding them. You could look that up by either the name and look it up as an SDS or an MSDS sheet. True or false? Okay. Line number 24.5 tells you the transportation information. In your head, try to figure out which one it is. It's line 14. Okay. Hazard class 1 has some really nasty hazmats in there, and we call them table 1s. If you have any amount of them, you've got to you would also have to put a placard on the truck. But importantly for you people, these are nastier hazmats. And for hazard class 1, it's 1.1s and 1.2s and 1.3s. Flammable gas is a table 1 hazmat. Yes? Right. And this one, just the black skull, is a table 1. And I don't think you should be taking any table 1s into your facility, but I don't know. Not these anyway. You could, the blue, the pretty blue one is a table 1. True or false? And you could get some of that in your facility. Hopefully it's a smaller amount. And dangerous when wet, they're normally metals. Okay. On hazard class 5, it's only the red one with the red on top that could potentially be a table 1. On hazard 6, all of these are table 1s. True or false? Yeah. So you could get a white skull, rat poison, liquid or solid. It's not a table 1. The black skull is a table 1. You get any amount of that, you'd have to have a placard on the truck, and you probably will not be receiving this at your facility. But you guys could be getting white skull stuff there. Okay. Michelle, did you want to ask any questions?
No, I really don't have any questions.
I would like you guys to clap if you would like me to end now so that you can fill out the form to actually win an all-expense paid trip to Hawaii. Oh, now I'm feeling, now we got a, there we go. Okay. Please, you may send additional questions to Michelle. It's not that I wouldn't want to give you my email. It's steven.krieger@state.mn.us. I think I had it on the last slide. I just think under these circumstances, training's going on. It's a little bit different in this case. I think if you run it through Michelle and then she runs it to me, I'd be happy to give you a call back directly or whatever. But I want to thank everyone so much. I know this is a really long class. It's supposed to go 4 hours, but I think that we hit the most important parts of what you need to know to get you on a good start. And even with people that do this on a regular basis, they need to review these 9 different classes better. So you guys get good at them, and then you'll all get 100 days and life will be great. Thank you so much, everybody. I'll hang on for a few more minutes in case there's any questions. Take care, everybody, and be safe.
Thanks for coming, everyone.